There, biology students. We worked a little bit on graphing last week, and you learned some of the basic types of graphs, and that's great because many of you will not become biologists, but almost all of you will have to learn to look at data and trends and graphs and get information from them. If you get really good at this and become something called a data scientist who works with spreadsheets to look at data, you could make graphs like this. But more of what you could notice from this graph is this is people who are searching for a job over time. That job is data scientist. And you notice that in general, this trend is upwards. Over time, people are looking for people who have these skills, and they're willing to pay good salaries for people who can do data science. I know this to be true, and so in addition to teaching you guys data science, I've also been teaching it to my son. Here he is at Halloween. Every Halloween we get his candy, and I want to make it like a fun thing to introduce to him to spreadsheets, so we sort it by types of candy, and we make a graph of the candy types. And so here we have a classic bar chart of his haul from one of his candy catches, one of his Halloween trick-or-treatings. So I have taken some of this data and made it sort of a nice clean graph. Here is the past 4 years of my son's actual candy counts. I'm going to make this data available to you, and you guys are going to do some graphing with this data. The data from the Gummy Bears lab was kind of messy, had some columns and stuff that weren't working very well. So I thought I'd just give you this clean set of data that you can work from. So you should have access to this stuff. You are going to get some of it yourself, and then you are going to paste it into a new spreadsheet. I'm going to be showing you what to do, and you are going to work along with me and answer some questions along the way. So here we go. You are going to go into your Google Drive. You are going to start a new Google Sheet, something like this. You can name it Sweet Graphing. Okay, for this stuff that we're working on. You are going to come to this. You are going to highlight all of this data. You are going to control copy it. You guys probably know how to copy, but I'm going to use these functions just so you guys can see what I'm doing. Come over here to Sweet Graphing, and I'm going to paste the data here. All right, so now you got the data. Let's look at it for a second. First, I'm going to make this full screen. This gets all the data on there, but some things to notice about how the numbers versus the words are portrayed. What do you notice when you look at how the words are laid out versus how the numbers are laid out? Okay. What you can see is that numbers tend to be on the right-hand side of the screen versus words tend to be on the left-hand side of their box. Okay, so here's a number right-hand side, word left-hand side. That's just something interesting to note to how spreadsheets like to organize. I'm going to make this data a little bit more visible just by narrowing those columns so we can see how things go. So if I just drag that over, as long as I've highlighted both columns, it does it for both things at once. And that's one of the nice things about doing things with computers. They can do it repeatedly, so you don't have to do things repeatedly. And we're going to use that by the end of this demonstration to do have it do some calculations for us. So we've now got our data looking a little bit better here. If you want to, you can vertically align everything so that the things line up a little bit better like that. But we don't really need to do that. I'm going to undo that by clicking this button here. That's just stuff that you can use if you want to. Now, in the bottom left-hand corner, you see a plus symbol that says Add Sheet. I'm going to hit that 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Then I'm going to go back. Each one of these is its own currently empty spreadsheet. We're going to be putting things into them. So here I'm back at sheet 1. One thing I'm going to do to help keep things sorted and organized is I'm going to rename. I'm going to click this little green arrow, come up here and rename this puppy. I'm going to call this total data. So this has all the information from the past 4 years, the top 10 candies, and how many of each type of candy my son collected. Now, we're going to work on making a graph. We're going to start with just 1 year, the most recent year. I'm going to copy, actually I'm going to grab all of this. I'm going to grab these 2 columns and copy them. Then I'm going to take them over here to sheet 2 and paste them. So I brought the data over. It's still there. I copied it. I didn't cut it. Okay. So the people at Google know that you want to do graphing with spreadsheets. They make it pretty easy. I'm just going to click this box, this thing in the upper left-hand corner there, and then I'm going to insert a chart. And the geniuses at Google have made one for us already. If we look at this chart, this doesn't do a great job of showing our relationship between the types of candy and the numbers. Why? Because you got the total on here, and that's such a ridiculous number that it dwarfs everything. In order to get that on the screen, you have to make the scale super huge. This is an example of where scale is really important. We can't see much difference between these numbers because there's this one crazy one here. Also, it's got 2021 as one of the data bits. Yuck. This is not a great graph. I'm going to see if I can get rid of that. I'm going to click on these 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner and delete it. In order to get a better view of this data, I am going to grab just the data itself. This is part of what was problematic when we were trying to graph the gummy bear data. I'm just going to get some data itself. All of these are numbers. All of these are the identifying words. And now I'm going to insert a chart for that. And the thing we get is a lot better. Okay? It just has the 10 types of candy that were popular this year. And we can get a pretty good sense of the scale of how they compare to each other by glancing at this. Okay, Milky Ways is about 1/4 of Snickers and lollipops. What are some things that this graph is missing? Well, over here we have the ability to edit it and add some of those things back in. Most of what this graph has is pretty good. It's a column chart. All this looks fairly reasonable. I'm going to come over here to customize, because hopefully one thing you noticed is that this graph is missing a title. Okay? All graphs should have a good title to fill it in. This is already set up for my chart title. I'm going to title this. You should remember which type of variable comes first. Do we list our y variable or our x variable, our dependent or independent first? Hopefully recall that we list our dependent variable first. So it's going to be number of candy versus type of candy. And ta-da, that appears up here in a nice title. And if I cared about like making it bolder, I could. That's not as important for what we're learning right now. One thing you might also notice is that this does not have any title for the axes. This is a little hard to find. I'm going to click on this arrow, and it's giving me the chance to name my horizontal axis title. So down here I can put candy type. I can continue to try and spell that word correctly. Candy type, boom, there it is. Okay, and I can do the same thing for my vertical axis. Number of candy. If this was more, I'll say, scientific data, we might need to put a units on here, grams or milliliters or something like that. Normally you would have your units in parentheses, but because it's just number of candy, we don't need to specify an extra unit. And there we have it. That's a pretty good graph. We could go a little bit better though to show the exact differences between these. Having big gaps between 60 and 80, that's kind of a far range. So let's go back in one more time to edit the chart. And this time under Customize, I'm going to look at the grid lines and ticks. This is set up for the vertical axes. Okay. Right now, the steps, they're picking what it is. I'm going to pick my step value, which is how much it goes up each time. I'm going to make that 10 instead of 20. And right there, we get some more lines that help us see better the difference between the various columns. I can put another smaller line in. I'm just going to put one line in between each spot. And that helps me see where like 75 and 65 would be. It just gives the person looking at our data an easier way to see what is happening and see the data that is there. Okay, I think those are the only adjustments I would make. This is now a pretty good looking graph. If you stretch it out vertically, that might help see some more of the differentiation, but this is a nice bar chart which matches the data that we have here. Qualitative data about the brand name versus quantitative data, and it invites a comparison by letting us see how things stack up next to each other. Let's go ahead and name this tab. I'm going to click down here in this little arrow, go up to rename. So this is, I'll just call it types bar for 2021. So you could find how the various candy types on a bar chart for the data from 2021. I'm going to go ahead and take this data and use it to make one of our other graphs. I'm going to come over here and paste it. Okay. I'm going to make some space here so that I can make another graph. I'm going to grab that. I click that. You see I've got a little hand up here at the top. I'm going to grab this and drag it over one row. One of the nice things you can do with a spreadsheet is put in formulas. I'm going to go down here to the bottom and type an equals sign. And right away, the folks at Google are thinking, oh, do you want to put in a formula? Do you want to average this data? Do you want to sum the data? And it's going it for C1 to C10. And that's how people who work with spreadsheets refer to the columns and rows. This is column C, and this is rows 1 through 10. So it's out giving me these two possibilities. I'm going to go ahead and sum the data, and you should know that sum means add it all up. So it's showing me this is the data that we're going to add up, equals the sum of everything that's in C1 to C10. I'm going to press return or enter, and boom, it gives me a number there. And again, that number is the sum of all of these numbers together. If I take away a value, it drops down to 381. I'm going to put the value back in, it's back there. If I make it one bigger, oh, now it's 401. So it's just a coincidence that our number worked out to be this perfectly round 400 for the top 10 candy types this year. I'm now going to do another formula in here. I'm going to do an equals sign, and I'm going to turn 72 into a percentage of the top 10 candy types. I'm going to click on that cell. And so I clicked on C1, and it put that formula automatically in for me. As a percentage, I want to know what that value is out of the total, so I'm going to divide by the total. So now it's saying I'm going to give you what C1 divided by C12 is. Great. There it is, 0.18, which is 18% of the total. I'm going to take that same formula and I'm going to reuse it. I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to paste it in down here. Uh-oh. It says, you have a mistake. Something's not working. You're trying to divide by 0, which is not okay. So I have a problem with my formula. I'm going to click on it. It's going to show me the two cells that it's working with. It's taking the one right next door, which is C2, and it's dividing it by C13. As I move down a row, it moved the formula down a row, and it's trying to divide by something there, and there's nothing there, and so it's trying to divide by 0, and that's why the computer's not happy. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here to make it easier to see these numbers. I'm going to do that one more time. Okay, so I need to change this formula so that I can reuse it every time, because I could come back and type in C12, and I could type the formula in each time, but we want to take advantage of the computer's ability to generate all these things on its own. And here's the trick. In my original formula, I'm going to put the cursor in between the number 12 and the letter C. And I'm going to type a $sign. And that $sign is the way the spreadsheet knows to always use the same value. I'm going to put it in. It's the same thing here, but when I copy that one and paste it down here, it's now automatically going to C12. The C2 part has changed, but the C12 is locked in. And since that works well, I can now copy that and I can just paste that in each one of these. Another faster way to do this is to drag from the top down and then hit Command D, and it duplicates the formula into every spot. You can see, once again, it's always doing the cell next door divided by that one we locked in with a $sign, C12, where the total was, or the sum. So now I've got all of my data as percentages. I'm going to make it look a little bit prettier. I'm going to grab that column. I'm going to say, how those numbers, they don't look great. They look a little too much details. I'm going to turn those into percentages. That looks a little sharper. This has a lot of detail, being 7.25 and 7.75. I'm going to come up here where I can increase the number of decimal spaces or decrease the number of decimal spaces. I'm going to decrease them and just get them into nice integer numbers that's less confusing and weird. Okay, so now I have all my data, each one of these candy types, versus its percentage. What kind of graph are we going to see here? I'm going to grab all of this. I'm going to once again insert and let the Google scientists make it. It came back with another bar chart. But we're going to change ours and go into the suggested options of having a pie chart. I'm going to zoom back out now that we're not doing such close work anymore, so we can take a look at this. This is a pretty good pie chart. It's got nice colors, got all the things separated. It's missing what? Like the previous one, it's missing a title. We want to make sure our graphs have good titles. So I'm going to call this percentages versus types 2021. Okay, so now we've got a title. We've got a pretty good looking graph. Unfortunately, it's on top of our data. I'm going to drag it over here so it's sort of next to the data it's demonstrating. This is a little cluttered because we've got the percentages and the numbers. I'm going to go ahead and click on that column, or double click on the column. I'm going to hide it just to make it look a little nicer. We've got our percentages and a good graph that shows us what's going on. We should title that tab. Again, we're making sure people can find what we did. We know what we did, but we want other people to be able to find our work as scientists. So this is types, percentages, 2021. Just a name. All right. We've made a good bar graph. We've made a good percentage graph, percent of a whole, percent of the top 10 types. Now we want to make a line or scatter graph. I'm going to come back to this data. I'm going to grab the totals for each year. I'm going to copy that and take it over here to sheet 4. When I first paste it, it spreads it way out, and it's kind of hard to see, and I have to move each one of these on their own and things. So I'm going to undo what I just did, and I'm going to do that again. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to copy the data, but this time when I want to paste it, I'm going to show you a new trick. And amongst the options, I have paste special. I'm going to paste transposed. That means I switch the rows and the columns. When it's set up in columns, it's a little easier for Google and the sheet to do some work for us. I'm going to go back to the total data. I'm going to copy this stuff. Copy the years. Control copy. Again, you can use Command copy or Alt copy, whatever works on your computer. I'm just doing it so you guys can see. I'm going to paste special, paste transpose. So I right click to be able to get to my options here, paste transposed. And now my years and my totals are nicely matched up. There's some space in between, so I'm going to grab all of the data and I'm going to go to data. And it gives me the option to sort the sheet by column B. I can either just sort just a small range or the whole thing. I'm going to sort these. I'm going to go Z to A so that the biggest one is on top. And boom, it stacks up my data nicely. These are just little tricks that you can use that we are attempting to teach you so you can make nice spreadsheets and charts. So here is my data, the amount of candy compared to each year. I'm now going to grab that, insert, chart away. Interestingly, it's stuck on pie chart because that's the last thing we did. That's not the best kind for this. We'll first take a look at that. A line chart, not bad, shows us kind of what's happening. But this is giving us more data than we probably really have. We don't know what it would be if we went trick-or-treating in the middle of the year between 2019 and 2020. We're generating some extra data in there. So a line chart really isn't our best one either. We're going to go all the way down, just scrolling up and down here within chart types to scatter. And this just gives us the data points themselves. Okay, that's a pretty good representation of what's happening with this data. We can make it a little bit better, a little clearer, and get more information out of it. I'm going to go back in here to edit the chart. I'm going to customize. I've got titles for all of my axes. That's pretty good. I am going to come down here to series. First I'll fix my grid lines and ticks. Okay. Once again, there's a big gap between the data and it's kind of hard to see and compare. So I'm going to make the step values 100. And that gives me a few more lines on my graph to see where things are. And once again, I'm going to put a minor line in between. I'm just going to put one line in between. So that gives me where the 50 lines are. And again, that just makes it a little easier to see what's happening on my chart. I'm going to go back in to edit a little more. And one thing that we can do when we have data, especially scattered data, is try and put a best fit line on it to show the trend overall of the data. The funny place where you do that is this word series here. Open up the series and scroll on down to where it says trend line. What is the trend of this data? I'm going to click that box and it's going to generate, I'm going to zoom out again so we can see it all. It's going to generate a line that represents the data. I've got 2 points above, 2 points below. With a scatter plot, we don't connect each point. We generally look for what the overall trend of the data is doing. That's pretty good. That's pretty helpful. I am going to take it a step further and show, this has no label. I'm going to make it red to stand out better. I'm going to make it thicker. So there's showing off my data. And like I said right here, there's the label. I'm going to label that. I'm going to use an equation. The computer can automatically generate what the equation is for that line. It's kind of a crazy equation because we're putting in years, 2019, 2020, and we're having to do algebra to generate what the candy values are. So now we have an equation for our line. One thing that's fun to do once you have that kind of an equation is be able to make a prediction. Okay? We have the data in here for the past 4 years, and in general the trend is he's getting more candy each year. So what is that going to be like next year? Well, I can't tell because it's off my graph. what could I change in here so that I could see what it's going to be next year? I'm going to change the horizontal axis. Okay? I'm going to come down to the horizontal axis and I'm going to make a higher maximum value. Right now it's going from my minimum to my maximum. I'm just going to make this 2022. And when I do that, oh, I can't quite see where this line hits next year's predicted amount of candy. So I got to go back and look around some more. I want to change it so I can see where this line hits 2022. I could do that by changing what? The vertical axis. Okay? I'm going to come down here and give this a higher maximum value. I'm going to make this 800 to make sure I can get it on there. Okay, probably didn't need to go that high. Looks like he's only going to be less than 700. It's going to be around 600 and maybe 50 or 640 is what we can predict next year. If I wanted to guess how much candy's coming home in years beyond that, I could stretch this out to like 25 and see, okay, now that's going to be over 800. But I can start predicting future year candy hauls by looking at where this line is going to go. That's something that we like to do as scientists. But I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself. Maybe he'll stop getting candy for me after next year. Let's see. So here are 4 nice graphs. We should name this. Okay, I'm going to rename this total versus year. We've got a line or scatter graph. We know how to make those and tweak those. We've got a pie chart. And we've got a bar chart. What you're going to do in sheet 5 is up to you. You've got an open sheet here. We want you to try and make some sort of graph coming from this original data. You could pick one type of candy like Snickers and do Snickers versus years. You could look at different types of candies for different years. How does the number change? Does one candy stick around for longer than others? You could do something with the totals and the percentages of the top 10 out of the total. Whatever you want, you get to come up with another graph that you can make over here. This is your chance to impress us. This is your chance to move your grade up to a 7 or even an 8 by coming up with some sort of graph of your own type. This is an opportunity for you to be a little creative and use some of these tips and tricks that I've been showing you about how to move things and sort things and edit your graphs. We hope you find something fun to work with, and I hope you've learned something from this presentation.